this is anecdotal. And World Without Wine, I've been running that for 5 years, and I've worked with hundreds of people now, and helped many people kind of ditch the drink. I haven't managed to help many people moderate, I must say, but that's kind of part of what I'm going to say. So I thought I'll tell you my story, my sorry tale, but a very short version. And then I'll tell you how I managed to stop drinking, and then just a few things that I've pulled out about my experience, what I've learned, particularly around the moderation thing. I wrote a blog once, didn't I, Phil, that he liked? It was called 7 Things I Know About Moderation. So I'm talking from that blog. Right, so my story, I mean, I grew up in London, you know, sharing a flat with other girls in my 20s. And, you know, we all used to drink, but it wasn't crazy. But one morning I woke up in hospital, and what had happened is I drank so much the night before that I'd completely blacked out. And unfortunately and dangerously, I'd blacked out in the bath with the door locked. And thankfully my flatmates, you know, one of them banged on the door, got no answer, panicked. So she rang the fire brigade, who came and knocked the door down. And I was drowning, basically. So that was a very narrow escape. So I tend to divide my story into 3 wake-up calls. So that was wake-up call number 1. And that should have, you know, indicated to me that there was a bit of a problem here. But I didn't. I laughed it off, and my friends all laughed it off. And it just became a story, you know, and it was, oh, did you hear about Janet in her bath? You know, what an idiot, ha, ha, ha. So I carried on, you know, with the wine every evening, you know, but there weren't any other incidents like that. And then when I was 30, I married someone who also loved to drink. So we just fell in that, you know, very common British pattern where you go to Sainsbury's, you get your bottles of wine. Maybe we used to like Jack Daniels as well. And we'd get through a bottle of Jack Daniels and a bottle of wine a night. And we thought it was completely normal because all our friends did that. And we'd have dinner parties that would go until 3 o'clock in the morning, where everybody would get completely hammered. But it was fun, you know, and we both had good jobs, and we had a child, and everything was very functional. Managed to keep the show on the road, and we felt that we worked hard, so we played hard, you know, that was us. So that kind of went on nicely. And then in my 40s, I got divorced and married again. And that's when the trouble started because my second husband hardly drank at all. You know, he's French, and they have a completely different attitude to drinking. They're not like the Brits, you know, they don't go out and drink because they want to get the buzz and whatever. So, you know, after a while, he realized how much I drank, and he said, you know, you really drink too much and you change when you're drinking, and I don't like it. And so he started kind of nagging me, and you know, I'm quite rebellious, so I kind of ignored it for a while. And then it became obvious, you know, that he was going to leave me if I didn't get my act together. So that's when I started trying to moderate. It never occurred to me in a million years to give up alcohol. I mean, what would life be without wine? So I decided that I was going to moderate. I looked up the safe limits, the low risk limits, and I was horrified to find out they were about what I used to put away in an evening. But I thought, oh, well, you know, I'm going to try. I'm a strong person. I usually achieve what I want to. So I remember having a little diary, writing down all my units, you know, and I would be okay because I'd be white knuckling it for, you know, that period of time. And then one night the wheels would come off and I would drink till I blacked out. And then the next day, obviously there'd be a huge row and I'd feel depressed and guilty, and it was a nightmare. So that was me trying to moderate. And that went on for 10 years. I call it my decade of moderation. And I still never thought I'm going to stop. I mean, no, why? How could I do that? I just didn't know how for a start. And I thought, well, I'm not going to AA. I'm not like those people, you know, I'm not an alcoholic. So yeah, that went on until I had my second wake-up call at the age of 55 when I got breast cancer. And it was quite serious, you know, I had mastectomy, chemotherapy, all that nightmare. And I still remember, I mean, this was years ago, but I remember asking my oncologist when he was, signing me off as okay. I said, I don't want to risk this thing coming back again. So what kind of lifestyle changes would you recommend? Shall I give up alcohol? Shall I eat more healthily? Shall I eat organic? I was prepared to do anything. And I swear, if he'd said to me, don't drink alcohol, I wouldn't have done, because I was scared. But he said, oh, just go away and eat and drink and enjoy your life. You've had a bit of a narrow escape, but you've got through it. So you must do exactly what you want. So I did, carried on drinking. And then eventually I had my third wake-up call, which I listened to this time. It was, I was away, it was here in South Africa. We had a weekend away with about 10 people. Most of them heavy drinkers, apart from my poor long-suffering husband. So, drinking away through Saturday, that was total blur. And then I woke up Sunday morning feeling dreadful, but pretending I was fine. And then we were having breakfast, and I said to the people around the table, I said, well, I've heard there's quite a nice house that we might be able to rent next time we do this. So why don't we walk to the next village? And they all kind of looked at me and they said, Janet, we did that yesterday and you were with us and you weren't stumbling, you weren't slurring your words, you seemed absolutely normal. So that was my walking, talking blackout. And I kind of Googled it and it said something like, if you have one of these, it means that it's not that you've forgotten stuff. Your brain is so soaked in alcohol, it can't remember, it can't make memories. And for some reason that did the trick. That really frightened me, because I knew that I was damaging my body. The evidence was coming out, the links between breast cancer and drinking, and I was, putting 2 and 2 together there. I knew I was damaging my body, but I didn't realize I was damaging my brain as well. And, as you get older, that's the last thing you want. So that morning, the Monday morning, I said to my husband, that's it, I'm done with alcohol. And to be fair to him, he didn't say, oh, I've heard that before, because every time I'd said something, I just said, I'm going to cut down, I'm going to cut down. But this time I said, that's it, I'm finished. I can't do this anymore, I'm tired. And I did stop. But of course, then I had to work out how to stop. So I trotted along to AA. But I just couldn't find my right group. I'm sure there's some fantastic groups out there, and I've got a lot of respect for AA because they provide that connection, which is essential. But my problem was I couldn't connect, with the groups. They were mostly male, and they were much further down the line than I was. I was probably on my way there, but I hadn't lost my house, I hadn't lost my job yet. So I couldn't connect with them, but I carried on looking. I was not drinking, but I was really struggling with it. So I went, I looked on the internet, and eventually I found a workshop in London, just a one-day workshop run by an organisation that you might have heard of called Club Soda. And it was great, because I met women there like me, women with nice families, good jobs, and they were drinking at least a bottle of wine a night, but not more. They weren't drinking in the mornings and whatever. So I could relate to those people. And we swapped numbers, and we also got some tools, obviously, some techniques from Club Soda. But because we kept in touch, I managed to get sober. And the way that I got into this work was that after I'd been sober for nearly a year, I was blogging actually at the time. I was blogging about my sobriety and getting lots of comments, and people were asking me questions, and I was telling them, just based on my experience, what I've done. And, I really enjoyed doing that. And then I started reflecting, because I was retired by then. And my professional career had been in training and development. So I'd had 25 years experience, as a HR person. So I thought, well, with all that experience, I can design a workshop for myself, because there was nothing like that here in South Africa. So that's what I did, and I ran the first workshop, and it was fully booked, and people loved it, and they stayed connected afterwards. And, that's how it started. And then I was an executive coach, so I retrained as a recovery coach. So we were able to offer recovery coaching and workshops. And then we started a membership because people that came on the workshops, they wanted to stay connected. So that's what we still offer today. And it's worked. We've run about 60 workshops, and we've helped hundreds of people now. So I just jotted down just kind of 7 things that I've learned from working with people. And I find that by the time people reach out for help, it's usually too late for them to moderate, because, people that can moderate, on the whole, they just do it. Drinking isn't really on their radar. And I absolutely agree with James when he said that it's a continuum. I always say alcohol is a spectrum. And at one end, we've got, the homeless man in the park clutching his bottle. And at the other end, you've got someone that never drinks. But you've got, the rest of the population is in between those two extremes. And some of us, like I was, we're moving towards that dangerous end. And in fact, there is, I don't know if you read the book that came out called Almost Alcoholics. There's many, many people that are almost alcoholics. And that's the kind of people that I tend to work with, that tend to, come to listen to what I do. So, many people come along and they say, oh, I want to moderate. But, going back to what James was saying, I say to them, to do exactly what you did. I say, okay, well, you know what the low risk limits are, try. I said, but if you find yourself drinking more, then you'll have to stop. So quite a few people have come to one workshop, been absolutely determined they're going to moderate, and then they go away with this plan, and then they come back about a year later and they say, oh, I've spent a whole year, trying and failing. I'm so depressed. I've finally accepted that I've got to stop. And for many people, me included, accepting that you will never drink again is the beginning of the journey. And then, we like to say we're taking people on a 2-step journey, because the next step, is to do the work, whether it's psychotherapy or whether it's finding new friends or a new hobby or something, that you have to find a way to kind of thrive in your alcohol-free life. Because, we work on people's limiting beliefs. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Annie Grace. She wrote this great book. Yes, everyone's nodding. Yes, I love Annie. And, her book's called The Naked Mind, and it's all about limiting beliefs. And she, as she says, what with the liquor industry and societal pressure, we've all been brainwashed that we need alcohol to have a full and happy life. And, it's rubbish, but it makes a lot of people rich. So that's why these, beliefs are there. So, as Annie says, we end up with this conflict, because in our conscious mind, we know we've got to stop drinking. But in our subconscious is saying, but, how will I ever have fun again? I'm going to lose all my friends. How will I relax? So you end up with these voices, fighting each other, which is a horrible feeling. So the work is to work on those beliefs, and in my case, I had this limiting belief that I couldn't socialize without alcohol. It was out of the question. So, I turned it around intellectually. I said, I'm sure I can socialize without alcohol. And then I had to do the work. And that meant 6 really tough months of going out there and socializing without alcohol. And I just hated it mostly. Usually I would, give up after half an hour, but every time I just forced myself out there. And I saw each event as a challenge. I didn't expect to enjoy myself. And I was journaling the whole thing. So, I was writing down, was there any moment that I enjoyed? And, finally, eventually, after months and months of this torture, I found, it worked. I still remember coming home in a cab and thinking, oh, I had such a good evening. I'm going to meet this lady next week for coffee, and I'm going to read this book. And I thought, oh, and I didn't drink anything. And that was a turning point, and it still took months after that. But once I realized I could do that. So now, my subconscious finally, it's accepted. that I can socialize without alcohol. So that's, you know, what we try and do when we work with people. We try and find out what their limiting beliefs are. And yeah, just another thing that I've noted is that moderation can be part of the decision-making process, you know, because you do it in stages. You think, oh, I can't possibly give up, I'm going to moderate. And then you try and you fail, and you try and you fail, and then gradually you accept. So it's part of the decision-making process. And, you know, the other danger point, I mean, it's hasn't happened at all to James, for which I'm very impressed, but many people that I work with, they'll complete a period of sobriety, you know, 6 months, as long as a year, not 8 years, but a very significant period. And then they'll say, oh, I think I'm going to try and moderate now, you know, I think I'll give that a whirl. And it never works. You know, it can work for a few weeks, and then gradually it creeps up. And, you know, we have forums, and we're talking to people all the time, and somebody will say, oh, right, I'm going to try and just have, you know, 1 glass of wine at this event, and everybody piles in, and they say, don't do it. So, you know, all I can say in conclusion is that out of the hundreds of people that I've worked with, you know, 95, 96% of them really need to stop completely. And from my personal experience, it is much, much easier to give up than to try and moderate for many of us, because moderation takes up a lot of mental space. You know, you're thinking about it all the time. It's exhausting. There's a lot of more interesting things to think about. That's me. Oh.
You're on mute, Phil.
I'll try that again with sound. Yes, thanks very much. You have given us very much some interesting things to think about, not least of which is the fact that nagging is sometimes effective. What I wanted to ask you, I think you said in the blog post that you alluded to, was that 95% of people, you know, find that, you know, giving up is the best option. I mean, of the 5%, this small percentage, is there anything that sort of distinguishes them from the rest? Yes,
and I'm so experienced now in giving workshops that I know when we all start off with a share, you know, with our story, and I know who's going to be able to do this out of people that want to moderate. And it's the people that didn't drink very much in the first place. I always remember we had one lady that said, oh, well, she would drink half a glass of wine and then she would put the rest in the fridge for the next night, you know, and we were all thinking, what are you doing here? So obviously she was a candidate for moderation. But mostly, you know, the people that I work with, they're drinking at least a bottle of wine every evening. And one thing that I didn't say, I do differ from AA a little bit in that with AA, it's portrayed as like a lifetime struggle, in effect, all this one day at a time. But the people that I've worked with, the people that have ditched the drink and are now happily alcohol free, it took them, you know, 6, 7 really difficult months, you know, changing their behavior. And it was tough. But then gradually it got better and better. And now, you know, in our organizations, we have sober buddies, you know, it's a bit like the AA sponsors. And, you know, they're absolutely happy in their decision. And there's no way they need to go to meetings and they need to label themselves alcoholics. You know, so that's where I differ. I think it's hard work for a few months and then, you know, the hard work is done. You can move on with your life.
Okay, I was going to ask 2 questions in one. There are sort of 2 things that happen, I suppose, is one is that you decide that you're going to change your behavior, and then you decide, you know, where you're headed, what your destination is. Are there any sort of common elements to the, you know, the motivations for changing drinking that your clients have, and you know, what makes, you know, not drinking a better goal, you know, psychologically than trying to moderate?
Yeah, well, we have an exercise called the why list that we make people do early on. And, you know, they have to list the reasons why they're doing this. I say, why are you here? And they're always really big reasons. You know, it's like, my husband's going to leave me. I'm not spending any time with my kids. When I do, I'm not connecting because I just want to drink my wine. And, you know, my work is going downhill. I'm not as effective at work as I used to be. So they're all really big reasons. And we also say to people, you know, giving up drinking, your drinking isn't a problem, it's an opportunity. Because, you know, if you can, because people's lives open up again. If they have had a serious problem, you know, they get isolated, they just care about, you know, being in situations where they can drink. They stop doing things that they used to do when they were younger, that they used to love doing, and their life becomes very small. So for me, it's such a joy to see people's lives open up again.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that I think socializing is an opportunity, you know, it's actually something which James mentioned as part of a sort of healthy attitude or healthy drinking pattern. As somebody who's sort of changed quite substantially their drinking habits, how does has your socializing changed? I mean, presumably there are differences in the experience of socializing now as from before.
Well, it's been very quiet for the last year for obvious reasons.
Sort of Zoom oriented at the moment.
Yes. But yes, I didn't really lose any friends, but I did, you know, inevitably have drinking buddies, particularly some girlfriends that we go out for long lunches. And you know, I was really keen not to lose people that I was fond of. So I changed my behavior because you know, I didn't want to judge them or say anything to them. They thought I was very odd to do this, but whatever, they indulged me because they loved me. So I would go out to one of our usual boozy lunches. I would take my alcohol-free bubbly or whatever, and I would stay for an hour and a half. And then when things started getting silly, I would just say, okay, I'm off now. And I'd drive home. And they understood, you know, I had to train them. But so I would say, you know, to answer your question, not really. No, I haven't, you know.
Yeah, the jokes aren't as funny necessarily when you're sober as when you're not. It's